Hi there and welcome to the dizzying heights above Tokyo in Japan, where we're going to finally do the conclusion to this Band-Maid album review. And I've taken longer than usual to come to a conclusion with this one. Now, usually, as you guys know, I listen through to the entire album, and then I listen to the album maybe a couple times more, go out, have a walk around with it, and then give my conclusion. This one took a lot longer for two reasons mainly. Now, the first one is obviously of the 8 tracks on the album, we'd already heard 5 of them before, and of those 5 tracks, the other reason is that they've been good. I mean, with me, Band-Maid all sort of ranges between, really amazing rock and, good rock. I've never been disappointed by a song, but none of the singles were really ones where I immediately went, wow, this is classic Band-Maid, this is the write and tell all your friends how amazing this band is kind of material. It was just all sort of good stuff. And then obviously I listened to the extra 3 tracks, and none of them particularly blew me away either. So I really thought, okay, this is where I need to sit down and I need to take the album in context, especially considering where it stands in their discography. Now, it's their 3rd album, and it's one that's written for them again, and it comes directly after, only 6 or 7 months after the 2nd album, which kind of defined their sound on a lot of people's, I think, opinion. It had Thrill on it, and it was one that sort of cemented them as going in the hard rock direction. So basically, this, as you can probably guess, what you probably can't guess is that this is going to end, this whole review is going to end with a very positive Band-Maid point. But first of all, let's just get through the sort of umming and ahhing and the slightly negative tone that I've got to admit is going to partly come into this. Now, the reason why I say partly negative is because when I listen to this album, I really try to get an idea, like I say, of it in context, try to listen to all the tracks and think, okay, how does this work when you sit down and listen to it as an album? And I was hoping that it would come together, and if anything, it kind of didn't. Now, I would say the first 2 tracks, which starting with the Non-Fiction Days, was a big part of the problem. The Non-Fiction Days, I started to like it more the more I heard it. It's a song that didn't wow me from the get-go, but the problem still remained that although its individual parts are quite good, it's kind of too long in my opinion. It outstays its welcome. By the last chorus, I'm not really feeling that energised anymore. So it's a good song, but it's not like a wow, this is the wow, I want to cement the beginning of my album type of song. I was kind of thinking that 2 sort of comparative examples, because it's normal to have long songs at the beginning of an album. That's not an unheard of thing. But if you take, for example, when like The Offspring, basically a punk band for all terms, The Offspring at the beginning of Americana, they're probably the most famous album for recent generations. They had the really long song Have You Ever? That was quite a long song to put at the beginning of a punk album, and it almost sort of feeds straight into the second one. And by their standards, certainly for a punk band, it's quite experimental. It goes through quite a few phases and things. And then counter to that, you have like bands like Blur at the beginning of the album 13. They had the song Tender, which is like 6 to 8 minutes depending on the version you listen to, and that's not really particularly experimental at all, but it is fiercely catchy. So really, to have a long song at the beginning, it needs to be something which really sort of blasts your intention to be experimental, or sort of shows what you've got, or just a big catchy one that draws people in. And Non-Fiction Days is quite a sizable song, and yet it's not the catchiest, it's not particularly experimental, it's just kind of middle of the road for them. So that kind of sets things off in a bad start. And then track 2 doesn't really cement much of a tone either. You kind of feel like the beginning of the album feels a bit wishy-washy, and considering it's an 8-track album, 2 songs in, a quarter of the album in, like I say, the more I listened to it, it never felt particularly cemented. Even as I started to like the Non-Fiction Days more, it just never felt like that beginning was good. But then you get to the song, forgive me if I remember the name wrong, Yoraku? That one of the rare ones for Band-Maid that actually doesn't have an English name. How ashamed I should be that I can't remember what it actually is. And that's where things started to settle down. Now, that of all the songs, that's the one that grew on me the most. That song really grew on me the more I listened to it. And I didn't give that a hugely positive review the first time I heard it, but the chorus really grew on me more and more the more I heard it, and I like those bits. I still maintain the riff, it really lets the song down. It's kind of bland, and I don't like the fact the guitar and the bass kind of just shadow each other from that bit, but still it's when you actually get into it, when you get used to how good the chorus is and it grows on you, that's a really good point. And that, I would say, is where the album starts making some sense for me. But even with that, the whole first section of the album it's okay. It's like I say, it's the indication of kind of the bottom rung of how I feel about Band-Maid, a group who I really enjoy and have been one of my favourites, if not my favourite band since doing this channel. it represents the sort of lowest bar that I can expect from them, which is just good rock. So yeah, if I was hearing this for the first time, I'd be like, yeah, this is a band I really want to hear more by. I wouldn't be thinking classic band, I'd be thinking I want to hear more by them. And I accept that there was a quick turnover in this album. Now, as I did mention, when you have staff writers on an album, there's always that question. People say, well, you know, did they just suddenly get told, okay, you have to write an album, you've got like sort of, you have to write your songs for this album, you've got like 6 months to turn it around, or even less than that, because they've got to get into a studio. It's always difficult to know when the songs were written. They could have been written directly for order. When you get staff writers, a lot of the time they might sort of just take something that they already had shelved that they were thinking about and develop it for the band. They might have had some ideas on the go already. They might have already had songs completed that they just put forward to it. I mean, without knowing more about how that happened, it's hard to know whether the album was written in a rushed fashion or not. It didn't feel like any of the songs hit quite as hard as the album that came directly before, until we get to the surprise of this album, which is the very last track. Now, Alone, I think, stands out as being the only song on this album that not only I think deserves to be a clear single, but actually it's well written, it's well formed, it's well structured, and if you're a big Band-Maid fan, you probably get where I'm going to go with this point. Because I was listening to this album under the impression that it was completely staff written. And then I went on Wikipedia, and oh boy, what did I notice? Put a big smile on my face. This is the only song on the album which is written and arranged by the band. Now, I know that we've listened to World Domination and Band-Maid as album listen-throughs already, but apart from that, we're working through the albums listen-throughs in chronological order. Otherwise, this is we've done first, second, third now, and the next album I think is Bring It, which is or Just Bring It, which is the fourth one. I don't know, considering where that sits, whether that's one that they wrote themselves or if it's not, but I'm gonna take a guess, and don't ruin it for me, guys, because remember that one's coming up next. I'm gonna take a guess that album is written by the band, and I'm going to take a guess that this song is the reason why. Now, apologies if someone's already told me in the comments before and I've forgotten this. If that's the case, then allow me the joy of finding out again with you guys when we move on to the Just Bring It album listen through. But I get the sincere feeling that song at the end being such a notable thing. Everyone talks about Thrill and the difference it made to the band and the way it set them up. If this is the way it appears to be from my listen through, I think that Alone actually is much more significant in the band history, because it showed that replicating that sound that had cemented with them was not as important as cementing quality, which seems to have come from writing their own song. And I really hope that what we're going to find out when I move on to that one is that Alone was the song where they went, okay, after this, just let them write their own damn songs. And from what a lot of people say, most people say that Just Bring It is their favourite album, from what I can tell. And, you know, I can tell, having heard basically all the singles in advance, that pretty much almost all of my favourite singles by the band are going to be coming up on that album listen through. So I'm going to have to really sort of calm myself down not to be too excited about that. But wow, after this album basically being, in my mind, a little bit of a, it's good, but it wouldn't turn me into a fan if I didn't already know what they were like, or until I heard the album afterwards. If I was hearing this when it came out, I'd be kind of like, I don't know if I'd even remember them enough to stick around for the next one. That's the horrifying bit. After that, if we find out that Just Bring It is their first self-written album, and because of that and how well it turned out to be, then I think that says more for the band than anything could. So my final conclusions on this is that this is an album that is okay. I actually think, because it doesn't seem to cement itself or really settle down in at any point into something, it has little moments, little flares, little occasionally good choruses, no amazing choruses. You know, it has little moments of experimentation, little clever bridges, but nothing really cements or sits down enough to be like a classic song of theirs. It's like flashes of brilliance, moments of greatness, without anything particularly settling enough. That this album for me is one where it's not a classic, but it's kind of good enough. And that by itself, when you're talking about Band-Maid and the quality that they've demonstrated as a band, therefore is not good enough, because they are above that. So I think I get the feeling that when I come to conclude, once I've heard all the Band-Maid materials we're hoping to do in this reviews, I get the feeling this album will sit at the bottom of my list when it comes to measuring up the albums. but it does seem that it has a huge significance in the history anyway. We're looking forward to seeing how this develops, and obviously next will be the if I've got the chronological order right, again I might not have, but I hope I have, next will be the Just Bring It album listen through, and I'm really looking forward to that. But as always, get in the comments, tell what you think. Try not to spoil it too much for next one for me, but I really like to know mainly what you think about this album. Let's talk about this album. Do you agree with me? Are some of your favourites on here? I know some of you guys really love some of the songs on this album. Can you relate to me when I say that this to me is just sort of, it sounds like them at their bare minimum? I'm not saying that as a talent or as effort put in, but it sounds like from songwriting and from which songs are their classics, this doesn't have any classics on it in my mind. See what see what you think of this album. Give me your opinions on that. I've really mulled it over and thought as much as I could about this one, but as I say, really excited to see what you think. Anyway, as always, you know how this works. We're all about the comments. All the social media platforms are linked in the description below, as well as this is part of a playlist, also described in the description below, if you haven't been following our track by track listen through and talk through about this album. But for now, from Japan, thank you so much for tuning in, and hopefully you'll join us on all of our other platforms in the future. But I'm going to return you to the sights of Tokyo. So, ciao ciao.